All right, everyone. I want to thank you for meeting me today. As you know, today I asked you to read Chapter 3 from School and Society Historical and Contemporary Perspectives. I'd like to go over some notes that I took and then talk a little bit about some new evaluation models that may or may not be coming to the district. First of all, if we take a look at comparing and contrasting the role of government from the time of Horace Mann to the year 2015, I think we'll notice several similarities. Horace Mann, who, as you learned from the text, was the first Secretary of Education for Massachusetts. He did the duties that any Secretary of Education would today, including Arne Duncan himself. Reports on the conditions of education and any improvements that needed to be made. Once again, very similar to what we see today in regards of what the Secretary of Education is charged to do on the state level as well as on the national level. Mann was a firm believer in going to the people, holding county meetings to get input on what society thought was something that needed to be done in education or some things that needed to be changed or altered in that matter. Just to give you a confirmation on that this is something that we see again today in 2015. As you know, here in Grand Island with Grand Island Public Schools, we hold our yearly town hall meetings where the superintendent invites the public to come in 4 or 5 times over a 2-week span to sit down and get their thoughts and their feedback as to where they want Grand Island Public Schools to focus on in the next 3 to 5 and then 10 years down the road. Gives them a great opportunity to meet with the public and to talk about the issues that are important to them and what the public feels, what the stakeholders feel are important and where they need to go in the future. Mann published journals that contained educational issues that schools were facing, as well as created reports that were sent to the governor and legislatures, almost a state of the schools type report. Educational Secretary Arne Duncan does this even to this day. One difference between 2015 and now, obviously technologically, Arne Duncan does a lot of his addresses through Twitter with Twitter chats, hashtag chats, where he will interact with people, with educators, with students to try and get that message out. As we talked about with Mann and that time frame, it was hard to get a hold of a lot of people. So people were forced to go to the people, holding county educational meetings where you'd go and you'd speak with a whole county to get feedback from a large number of people. It is the Twitter chats would be the 21st century equivalent of having a county educational meeting. Mann called attention to the poor shape that schools were in and helped gain support to improve physical condition of the schools. And I think this was something that really caught my attention was the idea of that the government had really no shame in calling schools and districts onto the carpet if things weren't right. As you may recall, Duncan formed his quote-unquote shame list for schools and districts that did not meet standards in his opinion, in their opinion. And if you think about it, I mean, that's definitely not something that we see in 2015. I mean, we don't publish a report that identifies individual schools and districts as being behind and inadequate in something. I mean, we definitely don't do that. So, as you can tell, there are some strong similarities, just a little bit different style and different input for what they were focusing on then, in this example, physical conditions of schools versus what we're focusing on now, academic yearly progress and educational reform in that type of aspect. Mann was a big proponent of the government of having high, and as well as the government having high moral standards in education, and having teachers hold those values and teach those values in school. In 2015, we're beginning to see much more clamoring, much more vocal support of getting teachers to teach and hold those moral values and those moral standards because, in their opinion, we're lacking in the moral aspect of education. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like that whole debate is very cyclical. And along with politics, when the pendulum swings too far to one side, the minority then becomes the majority and voices their opinion enough to get the pendulum to swing back to that other side. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm saying I think that's the way that our country works in the year 2015, which is something we as educators and you as frontline workers need to be on the lookout for, so you are aware of your surroundings and what your stakeholders and your public deems important and necessary. All right. Now that we would, one last thing I want to talk about before we move on to our teacher evaluation discussion. Mann was a big proponent of the government being in charge of a lot of basically all things education. He was, I don't want to say on the national level, because obviously, you know, Constitution is written so that states control the government, or states control education. He was all for states controlling the education. When it came to things like what books were, curriculum and books were provided for on a state-supported list. What equipment. Teachers were produced from state colleges and state-sponsored universities. Looking at trying to get teachers to understand that you follow what the state says in those orders. Same thing with where school is held, which is in public state-funded buildings and schools and institutions like that. So once again, very similar to what we see in 2015. Of course, the state leaves the option up to the local boards of education, but they in turn answer to state government. So very similar when comparing those that time frame to 2015. All right, now real quick before I get too long-winded and I lose you because I know you're tired. Let's talk a little bit about the teacher evaluation hot button debate that's going on right now. As I'm sure you are aware, across the country there's a heated debate, and the federal government has really kind of nudged their foot in the door and kind of supported this a lot. The idea or the concept of test scores affecting a teacher's evaluation. I'm not going to give you what my opinion is. I want you to form your opinion based on some things I'm going to give you and then some of your own research. This is something I want you to be aware of because it's coming, and I want you to have an opinion and be well versed on it, so that way when it comes to us, you will have your opinion, you'll have your say, and you can be educated onto the topic. Taking a look at some of the pros, let's start with the cons. How do you know when enough is enough, and what will be done to ensure that you're not changing the rules as you go simply to achieve the desired outcome? A lot of people believe that the only reason you are including test scores as an evaluation model is because you want to run out teachers. You want to find an easy way to fire and let go teachers that you don't feel fit your style. A January 2015 article I found from the New York Times. Let me get the title here. Teacher evaluation going from bad to worse. Raised an interesting point in regards to test scores being a part of the evaluation. The guest journalist, who was an award-winning principal in the New York area, stated that she's worried that the test score number will be altered yearly to reflect the outcome that they want. For example, the very first year it was introduced, the cutoff was there was 20% emphasis of the teacher evaluation placed on scores. After that year went through, there was only 1% of teachers that were deemed to be inefficient. So then the next year they got rid of the 20% and they doubled it to 40%, but they also put the emphasis on the national assessments as opposed to the state assessments. This is something that a lot of people feel is a proponent of this, because you don't know how you can control the outcome and who's to stop superintendents and districts from creating too high of standards intentionally to try and drive off teachers. Another thing that was brought up as a con to this kind of idea is the idea of too much pressure on students. There was a study published in January 2015 by J.C. Cassidy, Cognitive Test Anxiety and Academic Performance, that showed in a survey of 168 undergraduate students, low test scores were directly correlated to anxiety from the type of test. When the test was something that was low grade and not high stakes, if you will, scores were fine. But the more the teachers and schools hyped up the test and focused and put the emphasis on how important it was, the more anxiety the students got, and the more nervous they got because of those high stakes testing. Taking a look at the cons, the pro side of teacher evaluation in accountability. The idea of having test results affect teacher evaluation is beginning to reach some serious levels. The principle behind it is the idea that it will weed out ineffective teachers because the students will not perform at a high enough level because they are not receiving the instruction like they should. A March 2015 article, this was also found in the New York Times, grading teachers by the test, stated that if it's done correctly, teachers will learn to interpret their data and use the evaluation as a chance to reach new levels, which will ultimately help the school to grow, because that's our ultimate goal, is to push and reach the school improvement goals, the district improvement goals, the state improvement goals that we have for our set, and ultimately hit AYP on a yearly basis. All right, those are both sides of the equation. Once again, this was not my intention to push you one way or the other, just to provide you with some sides to the story. Please make sure you are well versed on the topic, and I look forward to meeting with you again next time. Take care, guys.